For most of her life, Too Deep carried questions too heavy for words. Where are my parents now? Do they still think of me? Would they even recognize me if we met again? Years blurred into decades, and while faces faded, the ache remained, an ache not for answers alone, but for a connection that whispered, "You were never forgotten." Now, that long-dormant hope stirred awake. The prospect of reunion loomed on the horizon, and Too Deep's heart trembled, not from fear, but from the raw vulnerability of longing. What would happen when she saw them again? Would it be tears, silence, healing? Perhaps all three. Because sometimes the most powerful triumphs in life aren't marked by applause or achievement, but by returning to those who once held you, if only briefly, in their arms. The sun dipped low over her quiet village as the scent of blooming jackfruit hung in the air. Chickens clucked in the distance. Too Deep stood barefoot at the edge of the rice field behind her home, the dying orange light brushing her face like an old memory. Her chest was tight. She had just returned from a conversation that shattered everything she thought she knew. Her ex-husband, a man whose past was laced with cruelty, had come back, changed. His hands trembled. His eyes glistened with remorse. And with a voice that cracked under the weight of its own revelation, he told her. Too Deep. Your parents aren't dead. They're alive. You were never meant to be an orphan. She froze. For more than 2 decades, Too Deep believed she was abandoned. Unwanted. A child cast aside and raised by an uncle who treated her as little more than a servant. Sold into marriage before she could understand the meaning of choice. Left to build armor from silence. Now, the truth came like lightning. Her uncle had lied, to protect his interests? To rid himself of a burden? He had convinced her parents to give her up, perhaps out of desperation. Perhaps out of greed. Too Deep didn't want to believe him. But something deep within, a whisper she had silenced long ago, told her this wasn't a lie. It was a truth buried too long. She told James everything. He listened without interruption. When her voice broke, he stepped forward and held her. "We will find them," he said softly. Whatever it takes. And so began their journey. They traveled across towns scorched by time. To forgotten record halls, dusty orphanages, and paper-thin government buildings where memories lived only in brittle files. They traced names and fragments. Some led to dead ends. Others opened new doors, then, a fragile breakthrough. In a remote northern town, an old woman, nearly blind, squinted at Too Deep. "You look like your mother," she whispered. She pointed them toward a mountain village, a place beyond roads and silence. They walked for hours under a harsh sun through broken paths, until at last, they reached a wooden house by the river. On a stool outside sat a woman in her late 60s, peeling cassava. She looked up. Time collapsed. Too Deep's knees gave out. Her heart surged with something older than memory. Mother. She whispered. The cassava fell to the ground. The woman stumbled forward. My daughter. My daughter. They clung to one another, trembling, crying, not for lost time, but for the miracle of this impossible moment. Her mother spoke of famine, of sorrow, of a desperate choice made in shadows. How they were told Too Deep had died. How they mourned in silence. Her father, now gone 5 years, had whispered her name with his final breath. As word spread, relatives emerged, cousins, aunts, even an elderly grandmother. Some didn't recognize her. Others collapsed into tears, pressing her hands to their lips. The reunion was chaotic, imperfect. And heartbreakingly beautiful. Too Deep didn't try to understand it all. She only knew one thing. Her past, her name, her roots, they were real. No longer fragments in her mind, but flesh and faces and trembling voices that said, "You belong." James watched from a quiet distance. He had seen Too Deep rise from fragile silence to graceful fire. And now, at last, she stood whole. That night, under a sky woven with stars, the family gathered for a simple meal. Too Deep reached for James's hand. I never thought I'd find them, she said. And now that I have. I don't know where to begin. James smiled. You don't have to begin alone. She turned to him, gratitude flooding her eyes. You didn't just help me find my family, she whispered, you helped me find myself. Laughter drifted into the trees. The past was no longer a scar, it was a story. Painful, yes, but radiant in its honesty. And a new chapter was being written, together. Throughout the night, voices mingled, some offering food, others photographs, still others too moved to speak. Too Deep sat beside her mother, holding her hands as if afraid they might vanish again. She listened to stories, of her childhood, of their grief, of dreams and sunflowers. I saw you once, her grandmother said, eyes soft with memory, in a dream. In a field of sunflowers. And you were smiling. Too Deep said little. Her heart overflowed. Words could not carry what tears could. Later, she slipped away to the riverbank, letting the cool water run through her fingers. Am I really home? She whispered. James approached quietly. You disappeared. I needed a moment, she said, brushing hair from her face. I've searched for so long. And now that I've found them, I feel both full and empty. That's what truth does, he replied. It's heavy, it's beautiful, and it's hard to carry all at once. She turned to him, eyes shimmering. Will they accept me? They already have, he said. But the question is, will you accept you? There was a long silence. A breeze moved the trees. She reached for his hand. Thank you, she said, for staying, but peace is never without interruption. The next morning, a young villager ran breathlessly toward the house. A man from the city is looking for you, he told Too Deep. He has documents. They followed him to the village center, where a man in a gray coat stood beside a motorbike, holding a thick, sealed file. Are you Too Deep? She nodded. I'm from the provincial court, he said. There's been a motion filed under your name. It concerns land once owned by your biological father, land that was recently sold. Illegally, by your uncle. Too Deep's blood ran cold. Why now? James asked sharply. Why come now, just after she finds her family? The man replied flatly, because the land has value. Developers want it. If she doesn't claim her right, everything will be lost. The peace they had just found began to tremble. But this time, Too Deep didn't waver. She stood tall, met his gaze, and said, Then I will go. I will face it. James held her hand. Not alone. Her mother pleaded, Don't get involved, child. I must, Too Deep answered. This isn't just about land. It's about truth, justice. And finally, having a voice. So once more, she returned to the city. But not as a forgotten girl. She returned as a daughter, a woman, a survivor, ready not to uncover her past, but to defend her future. Because the greatest journeys aren't always across oceans or mountains. Sometimes, they are the quiet ones. Back into the unanswered corners of our hearts.